This is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. To you, B.S. Yes, you. When red wins, she stands alone. Blood slicks her hair. She breathes out steam in the last night of the dying world. That was fun, she thinks, but she thought sours in the flaming. It was clean, at least. Climb up, time's threads into the past, and make sure no one survives this battle to muddle the futures her agencies arranged. The futures in which her agency ruled, in which Red herself is possible. She's come to knot the strand of history and sear it until it melts. She holds a corpse that was once upon a man, her hands gloved in its guts, her fingers clutching its alloy spine. She lets go, and the exoskeleton clatters against the rock. Crude technology, ancient, bronze to depleted uranium. She never had a chance. That is the point of Rad. After a mission comes a grand and final silence. Her weapons and armor fold into her like roses at dusk. Once flaps of pseudoskin settle and heal, and the programmable matter of her clothing knits back together. Red looks again something like a woman. She paces the battlefield, seeking, making sure. She has won, yes, she has won. She is certain she has won. Hasn't she? Both armies lie dead. Two great empires broke themselves here, each a reef to the other's hull. That is what she came here to do. From their ashes, others will rise, more suited to her agency's ends. And yet, there was another on the field, no crowding like the time-moored corpses mounded by her path, but a real player, someone from the other side. Few of Rad's fellow operatives would have sensed the opposing presence. Red knows only because Rad is patient, solitary, careful. She studied for this engagement. She modeled it backward and forward in her mind. When ships were not where they were supposed to be. When escape pods that should have been fired did not. When certain fusibles came 30 seconds past their cue. She noticed. Twice is coincidence. 3 times is enemy action. But why? Red has done what she came to do, she thinks. But wars are dense with causes and effects, calculations and strange attractors. And all the more so are wars in time. One spared light might be worth more to the other side than all the blood that stained Rad's hands today. A fugitive becomes a queen or a scientist or, worse, a poet. Or her child does, or a smuggler she trades jackets with in some distant spaceport. And all this blood for nothing. Killing gets easier with patience, in mechanics and technique. Having killed never does, for Rad. Her fellow agents do not feel the same, or they hide it better. It is not like Garden's players to meet Red on the same field at the same time. Shadows and sure things are more their style. But there is one who would. Red knows her, though they have never met. Each player has their signature. She recognizes patterns of audacity and risk. Red may be mistaken. She rarely is. Her enemy would relish such a magic trick, twisting to her own ends and Red's grand work of murder. But it's not enough to suspect. Red must find proof. So she wanders the charnel fields of victory and seeks the seeds of her defeat. A tremor passes through the soil dew, not coal and earth. The planet dies. Crickets quip. Crickets survive. For now, among the crashed ships and broken bodies on this crumbling plain. Silver moss devours steel, and violet flowers choke the dead guns. If the planet lasted long enough, the vines that sprout from the corpse's mouth would grow berries. It won't, and neither will they. On a span of blasted ground, she finds the letter. It doesn't belong. Here there should be bodies muddled between the wrecks of ships that once sailed the stars. Here there should be the death and dirt and blood and a successful op. There should be moons disintegrating overhead, ships aflame in orbit. There should not be a sheet of cream-colored paper, clean save a single line and long, trailing hand, burned before reading. Red likes to feel. It is a fetish. Now she feels fear and eagerness. She was right. She searches shadows for the hunter, her prey. She hears infrasonic ultrasound. She thirsts for contact, for a new, more worthy battle. But she's alone with the corpses and the splinters, and the ladder her enemy left. It is a trap, of course. Vines curl through eye sockets, twine past shattered portholes. Rust flakes fall like snow. Metal creaks, stressed, and shatters. It is a trap. Poison would be crude. But she smells none. Perhaps norovirus in the message. To subvert her thoughts, to seed a trigger, or merely to taint Red with suspicion in her commander's eyes. Perhaps if she reads this letter, she will be recorded, exposed, blackmailed, for use as a double agent. The enemy is insidious. Even if this is but the opening gambit for a longer game. By reading it, Red risks Commandant's wrath if she is discovered. Risks seeming a traitor, to be never so loyal. The smart and cautious play would be to leave, but the latter is a gauntlet thrown, and Red has to know. She finds a lighter in a dead soldier's pocket. Flames catch in the depth of her eyes. Sparks rise, ashes fall, and letters from the paper in that same long, tailing hand. Red's mouth twists. A sneer, a mask, a hunter's grin. The letter burns in her fingers as the signature takes shape. She lets its cinders fall. Red leaves then, mission failed and accomplished at once, and climbs down Thread toward home, to the braided future her agency shapes and guards. No trace of her remains, save cinders, ruins, and millions dead. The planet wails for its end. Vines leave, yes, and crickets, though no one's left to see them but the skulls. Rain clouds threaten, lightning blooms, and the battlefield goes monochrome. Thunder rolls. There will be rain tonight, to slick the glass that was the ground, if the planet lasts so long. The letter's cinders die. The shadow of the broken gunship twists. Empty, it fills. A seeker emerges from the shadow, bearing other shadows with her. Wordless, the seeker regards the aftermath. She does not weep, that everyone can see. She paces through the wrecks, over the bodies, professional. She works a winding spiral, ensuring with long-paced, practiced arts that no one has followed her through the silent path she walked to reach this place. The ground shakes and shatters. She reaches what was once a ladder. Kneeling, she stirs the ashes. A spark flies up, and she catches it in her hand. She removes a thin white slab from the pouch at her side and slips it under the ashes, spreads them then against the white, removes her G, love, and slits her finger. Rainbow blood wells and falls and splatters into grey. She works her blood into the ash to make a dough, kneads the dough, rolls it flat. All around, decay proceeds. The battleships become mounds of moss. Great guns break. She applies jeweled light and odd sounds. She wrinkles time. The world cracks through the middle. The ash becomes a piece of paper with sapphire ink and a whiny hand at the top. This letter was meant to be read once, then destroyed. In the moments before the world comes apart, she reads it again. Look on my words, ye mighty and despair. A little joke, trust that I have accounted for all variables of irony, though I suppose if you are unfamiliar with over-anthologized works of the early Strand 6th, 19th century, the joke's on me. I hoped you'd come. You're wondering, what is this? But not, I think, wondering who this is. You know, just as I've known, since our eyes met during the messy matter on Abrogast 882, that we have unfinished business. I shall confess to you here that I'd been growing complacent, bored even, with the war. Your agencies flash and dash, unthread and down. Garden's patient planning and pruning of strands, burrowing into time's braid. Your unstoppable force of our immovable object. Less a game of Go than a game of tic-tac-toe. Outcomes determined from the first move, endlessly iterated until the split where the fork off into unstable, chaotic possibility. The future we seek to secure at each other's expense. But then you turned up. My margins vanished. Every move I'd made by rote I had to bring myself to fully. You brought some depth to your side speed, some staying power, and I found myself working at capacity again. You invigorated your shift's war effort, and in so doing, invigorated me. Please find my gratitude all around you. I must tell you, it gives me great pleasure to think of you reading these words in licks and whirls of flame. Your eyes, unable to work backwards, unable to keep the letters on the page. Instead, you must absorb them, admit them into your memory. In order to recall them, you must seek my presence in your thoughts, tangled among them like sunlight in water. In order to report my words to your superiors, you must admit yourself already infiltrated. Another casualty of this most unfortunate day. This is now will win. It is not entirely my intent to brag. I wish you to know that I respected your tactics. The elegance of your work makes this horse seem like less of a waste. Speaking of which, the hydraulics in your spherical flanking gambit were truly superb. I hope you'll take comfort from the knowledge that they'll be thoroughly digested by our mulchers, such that our next victory against your side will have a little piece of you in it. Better luck next time, then. Fondly, Blue. A glass jar of water boils at an MRI machine. In defiance of proverbs, Blue watches it. When Blue wins, which is always, she moves to the next thing. She savours the victories in retrospect, between missions, recalls them only while travelling. Upthread into the stable past of downthread into the fraying future. As one recalls beloved lines of poetry, she combs and snarls the strands of time's braid with the finesse and brutality required of her, and leaves. She is not in the habit of sticking around because she is not in the habit of failing. The MRI machine is in a 21st century hospital, remarkably empty, evacuated. Blue observes, but never conspicuous to begin with. Nestled in the green heart of the forest, bisected by borders. The hospital was meant to be full. Blue's job was a delicate matter of infection, one doctor in particular to intrigue with a new strain of bacteria, to lay the groundwork for twisting her ward towards and or away from biological warfare, depending on how the other side responded to the garden's move. But the opportunity vanished, a loophole closed, and the only thing there was for Blue to find is a jar labeled "Read by Rubbing." So she lingers by the MRI machine, musing as she does on the agonies of symmetry, recording the water's randomness. The magnetic bones settled like reading glasses on the thermodynamic face of the universe, registering each bloom and burst of molecule before it transforms. Once it transforms the last of the water's heat into numbers. She takes the printout in her right hand and fits the key into it, into the lock of the letter-strewn sheet in her left. She reads, and her eyes widen. She reads, and the data get harder to extract from the depth of her fists clench. But she laughs, too. And the sound echoes down the hospital's empty halls. She's unaccustomed to being thawed. Something about it tickles, even as the meditates on how the phase shift failure into opportunity. Blue shreds the data sheet and the ciphertext, then picks up a crowbar. In her wake, a seeker enters the hospital room's wreck, finds the MRI machine, breaks into it. The jar of water is cool. She tips its tepid liquid down her throat. My most insidious Blue. How does one begin this sort of thing? It's been so long since I last started a new conversation. We've not isolated as you are, not so locked in our own heads. We think in public. Our notions inform one another, correct, expand, reform, which is why we win. Even in training, the other cadets, and I knew one other as one knows a childhood dream. I'd greet commanders I thought I'd never met before, only to find we'd already crossed paths in some strange corner of the cloud before we knew who we were. So, I am not skilled in talking up correspondence, but I have scanned enough books and indexed enough examples to essay the form. Most letters begin with a direct address to the reader. I've done that already, so next comes shared business. I'm sorry you couldn't meet the good doctor. She's important. More to the point, her sister's children will be. If she visits them this afternoon and they discuss patterns in birdsong, which she will have done already by the time you decipher this note, my cunning methods for spiriting her from your clutches, engine trouble, a good spring day, and suspiciously effective and cheap remote access software suit her hospital purchased 2 years ago, which allows the good doctor to work from home. Thus the braid strand 6 to strand 9, and our glorious crystal future shines so bright I gotta wear shades, as the prophets say. Remembering our last encounter, I thought it best to ensure you twist no other groundings to your purpose. Hence the bomb threat. Crude but effective. I appreciate your subtlety. Not every battle's grand, not every weapon fierce. Even we who fight wars through time forget the value of a word in the right moment, a rattle in the right car engine, a nail in the right horseshoe. It's so easy to crush a planet that you may overlook the value of whisper in a snowbank. Address the reader, done. Discuss chair business, done. Almost. I imagine you laughing at this letter, in disbelief. I have seen you laugh, I think, in the ever victorious army's ranks, as your dupes burned the summer palace, and I rescued that I could of the Emperor's marvellous clockwork devices. You marched scornful and fierce through the halls, hunting an agent you did not know was me. So I imagine fire glinting off your teeth. You think you've wormed inside me, planted seeds or spores in my brain, whatever vegetal metaphor suits your fancy. But here I repair your letter with my own. Now we have a correspondence, which, if your superiors discover it, will start a chain of questions I anticipate you'll find uncomfortable. Who's infecting whom? We know from a horse Trojans in my time. Will you respond establishing complicity, continuing a self-distraction, paper trail? Just to get in last word. Will you cut off, leaving my note to spin in fractal math inside you? I wonder which I'd rather. Finally, conclude. This was fun. My regards to the vast and trunkless legs of stone. Red. Red puzzles through a labyrinth of bones. Other pilgrims wander here, in saffron robes of homespun brown. Sandals shuffle off rocks, and high winds whistle around cave corners. Ask the pilgrims how the labyrinth came to be, and they offer answers varied in their sins. Giants made it, this one claims, before the gods slew the giants, then abandoned earth to its fate at mortal hands. Yes, this is earth, long before the Ice Age and the Mammoth, long before academics, many centuries down thread, will think it possible for the planet to have spawned pilgrims or labyrinth. Earth. The first snake built the labyrinth, says another, screwing down through the rock to hide from the judgment of the sun. Erosion made it, says a third, and the grand dumb motion of tectonic plates, forces too big of the cockroaches to conceive, too slow for mayfly us to absorb. They pass among the dead, under chandeliers of shoulder blades, rose windows outlined by rib cages. Metacarpals outline looping flowers. Red asks the other pilgrims nothing. She has her mission. She takes care. She should meet no opposition, as she makes a small twist, this for upthread. At the labyrinth's heart there is a cavern, and soon into the cavern will come a gust of wind. And if that wind whistles over the right flooded bones, one pilgrim will hear the cry as an omen that will drive him to renounce all worldly goods and retreat to build a hermitage on a distant mountain slope, so that hermitage will exist in 200 years to shelter a woman fleeing with child in a storm. And so it goes. Start a stone rolling, so in 3 centuries you'll have an avalanche. Little flash to such an assignment, less challenge, so long as she stays on script. Not even a taunt to disturb her path. Did her adversary, did Blue, ever read her letter? Red liked writing it. Winning tastes sweet, but sweeter still to triumph and tease, to dare reprisal every OP since. She's watched her back, moved with double caution, waiting for playback, or for commandant to find her small breach of discipline and bring her the scourge. Fred has her excuses ready. Since her disobedience, she's been a better agent, more meticulous. But no reply has come. Perhaps she was wrong. Perhaps her enemy does not care after all. The pilgrims follow guides down the path of wisdom. Red departs and wanders narrow, twisting passengers in the dark. Darkness does not bother her. Her eyes do not work like normal eyes. She scents the air, and olfactory analysis flash into the brain, offering a trail. At a particular niche, she draws from the snatchel a small tube that sheds red light on the skeletons arrayed within. The first time she does this, she finds nothing. The second, her light glints off a pulsing stripe of the femur, that jaw. Satisfied, she adds femur and jaw to her bag, then banishes the light and wanders deeper down. Imagine her in utter night, invisible. Imagine the footsteps, one by one, that never tire, never slip on cave dust or gravel. Imagine the precision with which her head swivels on her thick neck, swimming and measured arc from side to side. Here you can just. Gyroscopes whir in her gut. Lenses click beneath the camouflage jelly of those pure black eyes. She moves as fast as possible within operating parameters. More red lights, more bones join the others in the sack. She does not need to check her watch. A timer ticks down in the corner of her vision. Then she thinks she's found the bones she needs. She descends. Far below the pass of wisdom, she masters of this dark place, ran out of corpses. The niches remain, waiting, perhaps for Red. Even the niches stop eventually. Soon after that, guards set upon her, eyeless giants grown by the sharp-toothed mistresses of this place. The giants' nails are yellow, thick, and cracked, and their breath smells better than one might expected. Red breaks them quickly and quietly. She has no time for the less violent approach. When she can no longer hear their moans, she reaches the cavern. She knows by the changed echoes of her footsteps that she has found the place. When she kneels and stretches forth her hand, she feels 10 centimeters of remaining ledge, then the abyss. Storm-cold wind gusts past her, the earth's own breath, or some great monster's far below. It howls. The noise clatters off the bone, mobiles the nuns make down her, to remind themselves of the impermanence of flesh. The bones sing and turn, hanging from narrow twine in the darkness. Red feels her way along the ledge until she finds one of the great anchored tree trunks from which she mobiles hang. She shimmers out upon the trunk until she reaches the bones of some ancient nun, hung by some other. The countdown clock in her eye warns her how little time is left. She cuts the old bones free with her diamond-sharp nails and takes her replacements from her pack. Strings them one by one with narrow twine connecting skull and fibula, jaw and sternum, coccyx and xiphoid process. The timer ticks down. 7, 6. She ties the knots rapidly by touch. Her limbs inform her that they ache where they clutch the ancient trunk above an unfathomable drop. 3, 2. She lets the bones fall into the pit. 0. A rush of wind splits the earth, a roar in darkness. Red clutches the petrified trunk closer than a lover. The wind peaks, screams, tousles bones round. A new note rises above the ossuary clatter, woken by the cavern's wind whistling over precise fluted pits in the bones Red has hung. The note grows, shifts, and swells into a voice. Red listens, teeth bared in an expression that, if she saw it mirrored, she could not name. There's awe there. Yes, and fury. What else? She scans the lightless cavern. She detects no heat signature, no movement, no radar ping, no EM emissions or cloud trail. Of course not. She feels gloriously exposed, ready for the gunshot of the moment of truth. Too soon the wind dies, and the voice with it. Red curses into the silence, remembering the era she invokes local fertility deities, frames inventive methods for their copulation. She exhausts her invective arsenal and growls, wordless, and spits into the abyss. After all that, as professed, she laughs. Thwarted, bitter, but still, there's humor in it. Before she leaves, Red saws free the bones she hung. The pilgrim Red means the shape is gone, and the hermitage will be unbuilt. Now Red will have to fix the mess to the best of her ability. The abandoned bones tumble and tumble and fall and fall. But don't worry, the seeker catches them before they land. Dear Rat, in tooth and claw, you were right that I laughed. Your letter was very welcome. It told me a great deal. You imagined the fire glinting off my teeth. Knowing your fine attention to detail, I thought I'd put a little devil in it. Perhaps I ought to begin with an apology. This is not, I'm afraid, the omen you were anticipating. While you listened to my words, you might give a little thought to whose bones are corned and poked with this letter. That poor pilgrim who might have been, while leave a self-destructing paper trail when one can enjoy an acid-destroying scrimshaw session and let the wind take a turn trickling some ivory. Don't worry, he lived a fine life first, not the life you would have wanted for him, perhaps, and happy but useful to posterity, harboring the vulnerable, dimpling the future's punch cards, one new life at a time. Instead of building a hermitage, he fell in love, made glorious music with his fellow, travelled widely, drew tears from the emperor, melted her hard heart, bumped history out of one groove into another. Strand 22 crosses Strand 56, if I'm not mistaken, and somewhere down thread a bud's bloomed, bright enough to taste. It flatters me to find you so attentive. Be assured that I'll have looked long and hard at you while you assembled my little art project. Will you go still and turn sharply when you know that I'm watching you? Will you see me? Imagine me waving? In case you don't, you'll be too far off for you to see my mouth. Just kidding. I'll be long gone by the time the wind turns right. Made you look, though, didn't I? Imagine you, laughing too. I look forward to your reply. Blue. Blue approaches the temple in pilgrim's guise, hair shorn to show the shine of circuitry, curling around ears and up to a scalp, eyes goggled, mouth a smear of chrome sheen, eyelids chrome folded. She wears antique typewriter keys on her fingertips, even veneration of the great god Hack, and her arms are braceleted in whorls of gold, silver, palladium, glinting brighter than bright against her dark skin. Seen from overhead, she is one of thousands, indistinguishable from the slow press of bodies shuffling towards the temple. A borehole in the center of a vast, sun-baked pavilion. No one enters it. Such worshipful heat would wither their god on its silicon vine. But inside is where she needs to be. Blue drums her key-clapped fingers against one another with a dancer's precision. A, C, G, T, backwards and forwards, bifurcated, reunited. Their percussive rhythm sequences an airborne strain of malware. She's been breeding for generations, an organism spreading invisible tendrils through the society's neutral network, harmless until excluded. She snaps her fingers. A spark flares between them. The pilgrims, all 10,000 of them, all at once, collapse perfectly silent into one vast ornamented heap. She listens to the hiss and pop of overwhelmed circuits misfiring in filigreed brains of walks blissfully through the incapacitated pilgrims. Their twitching limbs, like surf, lapping softly at her ankles. It amuses Blue to know and that. In disabling their temple, in mounting this attack, she was herself performed an act of devotion to their god. She has 10 minutes to navigate the temple labyrinth. Down the service ladder, hand over hand, then one palm against the dry, dark wall to follow its broken lines to a center. It's cold underground, colder on her bare skin, colder still the deeper she goes, and she shivers but doesn't show. At the center is a boxy screen. It lights up as Blue approaches. Hello, I'm Mackind. Hush, Siri. I'm here for the riddles. Eyes of the mouth. It can't quite be called a face. Animate the screen. Regard her evenly. Very well. How do you calculate the hypotenuse of a right triangle? Blue tilts her head, stands very still, except for the flexing of her fingers at her side. She clears her throat. 'Twas brilling, and the silty toves did gyre and glimmer in the wave. Siri's screen blinks with static before it asks, what is the value of pi to 62 decimals? The sedge is withered from the lake, and no birds sing. A fistful of snow skitters across Siri's face. If train A leaves Toronto at 6 p.m., traveling east at 100 kilometers per hour, and train B leaves Ottawa at 7 p.m., traveling west at 120 kilometers per hour, when will they cross? Lo, the spell now works around 3, and the clankless chain has both thee. O'er thy heart and brain together hath the word been past, now whither? A flash of light, Siri powers down. Further, Blue adds, stepping lightly towards the box, making to lift it into the heavy bag next to it. Ontario sucks, as the prophets say. The screen flashes again. She steps back, startled. Words crawl across the screen, and as they do, her eyes widen, and the screen's blue-white light catches on the chrome paint of her mouth as it spreads slowly into a ferocious grin. She clocks her eyes keys one final time before shedding them from the fingers. The sheen from her mouth, the metal from her arms as she steps sideways into the braid. The heap of ornament shivers, rusts, flakes, indistinguishable from the fine grit of the cavern floor. The seeker, following after, distinguishes every grain. Dearest Blue da ba dee, a darling intrusion, mad props. I never would have believed your party would risk working strand 8827. This far down thread until I recognized your distinctive signature. I shudder to imagine an equal and opposite incursion. May casualty forbid, Commandant, ever dispatch me to one of your viney, hivy elf words. Profusely floral, all arching elder trees, neural pollen, bees gathering memories from eyes and tongue, honey libraries dripping knowledge from the comb. I harbor no illusions I'd succeed. You know, find me in an instant. crush me faster. I'd walk a swath of rock through your vacancy. No matter how light I try to step, I have a Cherenkov green thumb. I know. Cherenkov radiations, well, blue. Never let facts break a good joke. But you're subtle. I barely heard the signs of your approach. I won't tell you what they were, for reasons you'll understand. Imagine me, if you want, crouched atop a stairwell, knees to chin, out of sight, counting the burglar's footsteps as she climbs. You're not half bad at this. Did they crow you for this purpose? How does your side handle this sort of thing anyway? Did they engender you, knowing what you'd be? Did they train you, run you through your paces at what I can only picture as some sort of horrific summer camp under a watchful eyes of concentrated counselors who smile at the time? Did your bosses send you here? Do you even have bosses? Or a queen? Might someone in your chain of command want you to do wrong? I ask because I could have trapped you here. This strand's a prominent tributary. Commandant could field a swarm of agents without much casual risk. I imagine you reading this, thinking you would have escaped them all. Maybe. But those agents are busy themselves. And it would be a waste of time, to recall them and dispatch again, rather than bother Commandant with something I could handle on my own. I interceded directly. Easier for us both. Of course, I couldn't let you steal these poor people's good. We don't need this place in specific, but we need something like it. I'm sure you can picture the work required to rebuild such a paradise from scratch, or even recover its gleam from the wreckage. Think for a second, if you succeeded, if you stole the physical object on whose slow quantum decomposition the trans random number generators depend. If that triggered a cryptographic crisis, if that crisis led people to distrust their food printers, if canned green masses rioted, if riots fed this glitter to the fires of war, we'd have to start again, cannibalizing our strands, likely from your braid. And then we'd be at one another's throats even more. Plus, this way I can repay you for that trick in the catacombs with a note of my own. But I'm almost out of room. You like the Strand 6, 19th century. Well, Miss Leavitt's Guide to Etiquette and Correspondence, London, Gooseneck Press, Strand 61, suggests I should end by recapitulating my letter's main thrust, whatever that means. So, here goes. Haha, blueser. Your mission, objectives in another castle. Hugs and kisses. Rad. Postscriptum. The keyboard's coated with slow-acting contact poison. You'll be dead in an hour. Postscriptum. Just kidding. Or am I? Postscriptum. I'm just screwing with you. But postscripts sure are fun. Trees fall in the forest and make sounds. The horde moves among them, judging swinging axes, bowing bass notes from pine trunks with saws. 5 years back, none of these warriors have seen such a forest. In their home, stand sacred groves, were called Zoonwad, which means 100 trees, because 100 were all the trees they thought might have gathered in one place. Many more than 100 trees stand here, a quantity so vast no one dares number it. Wet, cold wind spills down the mountains, and branches clatter like locust wings. Warriors creep beneath needle shadows and go about their work. Icicle drips and snap as the great trees fall and flee. The trees leave gaps in green that bear the cold white sky. Warriors like those fleck clouds better than the forest gloom, but not so much as they love the blue of home. They loop the trunks with cord and drag them through the trampled underbrush to the camp, where they will be peeled and planted to build the great hands' war machines. A strange transformation some feel. When they were young, they won their first battles with bows, from horseback. 10 men against 20, 200 against 3. Then they learned to use reavers against their foes, to tear down their walls with gaping hooks. These days they roll from town to town collecting scholars, priests, and engineers, everyone who can read or write, who knows the trade, and set them tasks. You will have food, water, rest, all the luxury an army of hoof can offer. In exchange, solve the problems our enemies pose. Once, horsemen broke on fortifications like waves against a cliff. Most of these men have not seen waves or cliffs, but travelers bear stories from distant lands. Now the horsemen slaughter foes, drive them to their forts, demand surrender, and sound should surrender, not ensue. They raise up their engines to undo the knot of the city, but those engines need lumber, so off the warriors are sent to steal from ghosts. Red, hard-ridden for days, dismounts within the wood. She wears a thick grey dowel belted with silk around her waist, and the fur coat covers her head, preserving her scalp from the chill. She walks heavily, she broadens her shoulders. She has played this role for at least a decade. Women ride with a horde, but she is a man now. So as far as those who give her orders and follow hers in turn are concerned, she commits the entrance to memory for her report. Her breath smokes, glitters as ice crystals freeze. Does she miss steam heat? Does she miss walls and a roof? Does she miss adornment implants sewn through the limbs and tangled in her chest that could shore her against the cold? Stop her feeling. Seal a force field around her skin to guard her from this time to which she's been sent. Not really. She notes the deep green of the trees. She measures the timing of their fall. She records the white of the sky, the bite of the wind. She remembers the names of the men she passes. Most of them are men. 10 years deep into cover, having joined the horde, proven her worth, and achieved the place for which she strove, she feels suited for this war. She has suited herself into it. Others draw back from her in respect and fear as she scans the peeled logs and signs of rot. Her round snort stamps the earth. Red ungloves and traces the lumber with her fingertips, log by log, ring by ring, feeling each one's age. She stops when she finds the letter, kneels. The others gather around. What has disturbed her so? An omen? A curse? Some flaw their lumberjackery? The letter begins in threes, heart, rings thicker here and thinner there. From symbols in the alphabet no one present knows but Rad. The words are small, sometimes smudged, but still 10 years per line of next. And many lines, mapping roots, depositing or draining nutrients year by year. The message must have taken a century to craft. Perhaps local legends tell of some fairy or frozen goddess in the woods. Seen for an instant, then gone. Red wonders that expression she wrote as she placed the needle. She memorizes the message. She feels it ridge by ridge, line by line, and performs a slow arithmetic of years. Her eyes change. The men nearby have known her for a decade, but have never seen her look like this. One asks, "Should we throw it away?" She shakes her head. "It must be used." She does not say, or else another might find it and read what she had read. They drag the logs to camp. They split them, trim them, plane them, frame them into engines of war. 2 weeks later, the planks lie shattered around the fallen walls of the city, still burning, still weeping. Progress gallops on, and blood remains behind. Vultures circle, but they've feasted here already. The seeker crosses the barren land, the broken city. She gathers splinters from the engine's works, and the sun sets. She slides those splinters one by one into her fingers. Her mouth opens, but she makes no sound. My perfect Red, how many boards would the Mongols hoard in the Mongol horde got bored? Perhaps you'll tell me once you've finished with the strand. The thought that you could have trapped me, stranded me perhaps, or dear sorry not sorry, is so delicious that I confess myself quite overcome. Do you always play things safe then? Run the numbers so precisely that you can reject out of hand any scenario that has a projected success rate of less than 80%? It grieves me to think you'd make a boring poker player. But then I imagine you'd cheat, and that's a comfort. I'd never want to let you win. The very idea. I wore goggles, but imagine, please, the wondering of my eyes at your sweet interrogation in strand 8826. Did my bosses send me here? Do I have bosses? A suggestion of corruption in my command chain. A charming concern for my well-being. Are you trying to recruit me, dear Karchnil? And then we'd be at each other's throats even more. Oh, Peter, you say that like it's a bad thing. It occurs to me to dwell on what a microcosm we are in the war as a whole, you and I, the physics of us, an action and an equal and opposite reaction. My whiny Hyvy elf word, as you say, versus your tacky-macky diaspora. We Both know it's nothing so simple, any more than a letter's reply is its opposite. But which egg preceded what platypus? The ends don't always resemble our means. But enough philosophy. Let me tell you what you have told me, speaking plain. You could have killed me, but didn't. You have acted without the knowledge of sensation of your agency. Your vision of life in garden is sufficiently full of silly stereotypes to read as a calculated attempt at provoking and stinging. Unguarded response, hilarious, given how long it took me to grow these words, but unspoken, with such keen beauty as to suggest a confession of real, curious ignorance. We do have superb honey, best eaten in the thickness of calm, spread on warm bread with soft cheese in a cool part of the day. Do you know? Do your kind eat any more? Is it all tubes and intravenous nutrition? Metabolisms optimized for a far strand of food? Do you sleep, Red, or dream? Let me also speak plain, before this tree runs out of years, before the fine yellow fellows under your command make Zieg weapons of my words. What do you want from this, Red? What are you doing here? Tell me something true, or tell me nothing at all. Best, Blue. Postscriptum. I'm touched by the research effort expended on my behalf. Mrs. Lavia's guide is a good one, but that you've discovered postscripts? I look forward to what you could do with scented inks and seals. Postscriptum. There's no trick here, no thwart. Give my best to this Strand's Canis. We lay on our backs and watched clouds together when we were young. Blue sees her chosen name reflected everywhere around her. Moon-slicked flows, ocean thick with drift ice, liquid churned to glass. She munches a piece of dry biscuit on deck while the ship's hands sheep, dusts the crumbs off her mitts, and watches them fall into the white flecked pitch of the waters. The schooner's name is the Queen of Fairyland, carrying a full complement of hunters eager to stack clams in the hold, hungry for what fur and flesh and fat will buy them in the off-season. Blue's interest is partly in oil, but chiefly in the deployment of new steam technologies. There is a staggering of outcomes to achieve, a point at which to tip the industry, a rubber with which to steer these ships between Scylla and the Doom and the Charybdis of another, onto a course that leads to garden. 7 strands tangle on the collapse of survival of this fishery, insignificant to some eyes, everything to others. Some days Blue wonders why everyone ever bothered making numbers so small. Other days she supposes even infinity needs to start somewhere. Those days rarely happen while on a mission. Who can speak of what Blue thinks on a mission, when missions are often whole lives, when the story spun of her to wield a hunter's hook in years in the making? So many roles, dresses, parties, trousers, intimacies rolled into grasping a berth, and bundling into shapeless clothes to keep Newfoundland's winter at bay. The horizon blinks, and morning yawns above it. Hunters spill over the schooner's side, Blue among them. They sweep across the ice, tools in hand, laughing, singing, striking skulls and spitting skins.
Blue has hauled 3 skins on board when a big, brash beater catches her eye. It raises its head in threat for all of half a second before bolting for the water. Blue is faster. The beater's skull breaks like an egg beneath her club. She drops into a crouch beside it to inspect the pelt. The sight hits her like a hackapick. There, in the eye-trimmed fur, molted and marked at the hand-pulled paper, spots and speckles resolve into a word she can read. Blue. Her hand does not shake as she slices into the skin. Her breath comes even. She's kept her gloves clean, for the most part, but now she stains them, red as mine. Buried in the depth of glistening viscera is a dry piece of cod, undigested, scratched, and grooved with language. She hardly realizes that she's settled her body into the ice, cross-legged, comfortable, as if tea, not seal guts, steamed dark and fragrant beside her. She'll keep the pelt. The cod she'll push to powder, sprinkle over rancidly buttered biscuit, and eat for dinner. The body she'll dispose of in the usual way. When the seeker comes, hard and fast, on her trail, and all that's left is a smear of dark red on the blue snow. On hands and knees, she licks and sucks and chews until the collar's gone. My dear Mood Indigo, I apologize for, well, everything. It's been a long time for my perspective, and I'm afraid yours, since your letter. I had another decade or so with Genhis, who says hi, by the way. He told me the most interesting stories about you, or I assume it was you. After action reports following, and after those, I had the usual sort of routine, reverberating dance. As assessment wrapped the whole thing up, I passed as ever, the usual nonsense. I imagine you have something of the same. The agency squats far down thread, issues agents up. Then commandant doubts the agents who return. Yes, we diverge in our travels. Yes, we acquire shades. We round. We behave asocially. Adoption is the price of victory. You might think they would realize that. I spent the better part of a year recovering from your so-called sense of humor. Hordes and boards. I consulted the literature on scents and wax seals, as you suggested. It's all a bit counterintuitive, this business of communication through base matter, closing a letter, a physical object without even a ghost in a cloud. All the data on the failed piece of paper, with all an even more malleable substance, bearing, of all things, an ideographic signature, informing my handler of the message sender, her role, perhaps even her purpose. Madness, from all operational security perspective. But, as the prophets say, there ain't no mountain high enough. So I've essayed the work here. I hope you enjoy your whacked seal. I didn't supply any extra scent, but the medium has a savor all its own. There's a kind of time travel in letters, isn't there? I imagine you laughing at my small joke. I imagine you groaning. I imagine you throwing my words away. Do I have you still? Do I address empty air and the flies that will eat this carcass? You could leave me for 5 years. You could return never, and I have to write the rest of this not knowing. I prefer read receipts. All things considered, the instant handshake of slow telepathy through our wires. But this is a fascinating technology and its limits. You ask if we eat. It's a hard question to answer. There is no mono we. There are many uses. The us's change and interleave. Have you ever started into the working of the watch? I'm talking about a really, really good watch. If you want to see what I mean, climb down thread to 33rd century CE Ghana. Limited, unlimited in Accra does wonderful pieces with translucent nanoscale gears, no larger than grains of sand, teeth visibly small, actions and contractions and complications. They break light like a kaleidoscope, and they keep good time. There's one of you, but so many of us, pieces layered atop pieces, each with its own traits, desires, purposes. One person may wear different faces in different rooms. Minds swap bodies for sport. Everyone is anything they want. The agency imposes a modicum of order. So, do we eat? I do. I don't need to. We grow in pods, our basic knowledge flashed in cohort by cohort, nutrient balance maintained by the gel bath. And there most of us stay, our minds flitting, disembodied through the void from star to star. We live through remotes, explore through drones, the physical world, but one of many, and uninteresting by comparison to most. Some do decent and wander, but they can sustain themselves for months on the chart, and there's always a pod to go back to when you want it. All of this refers mostly to civilians, of course. Agents need more independent modes of operation. We are separate from the mass, and we move in our own bodies. It's easier that way. Eating is gross, isn't it? In the abstract, I mean, when you're used to hyperspace, recharging stations, to sunlight and cosmic rays, when most of the beauty you've known lies in the great machine's heart, it's hard to see the appeal of using bones that bulk from spit-coated gums to mash things that grew in dirt into the paste that will fit down the wet tube connecting your mouth to the sac of acid under your heart. Takes the new recruits a long time to get used to, once they're descended. But I enjoy eating these days. More of us do than care to admit it publicly. I revel in it, as one only revels in pursuits one does not need. The runner enjoys running when she need not flee a lion. Sex improves when decoupled, from animalist procreative desperation, or even from the desperation of not having had sex in a while, as I've had cause to note after my recent 2 decades sojourn and attendant but dry spell. I buy blueberry pancakes drizzled with maple syrup, extra butter, that expanding fluff, the berries pop against my teeth, butters bloom in my mouth. I explore sweetness and textures. I'm never hungry, so I don't race to the next bite. I eat glass, and as it cuts my gums, I sever minerals, metals, impurities. I see the beach from which some poor bastard skimmed the sand. Small rocks taste of the river, of wrapped fish scale, of glaciers long gone. They crunch, crisp, celery-like. I share the sensation with fellow aficionados. They share theirs with me. Through theirs lag, a sensor granularity remains an issue. So a roundabout way of saying, I love to eat. Probably too much. I seldom can in public, but at the agency, Commandant starts asking questions if I do. John's up thread to places where they eat all the time, feel decadent. How about you? I don't mean necessarily how do you eat, though if you want to fill me in, be my guest. Your descriptions of honey and bread, thank you for that. I've described a bit our overlapping models, communities, public and private, shared interests, shared senses. What's it like to be a part of yours? Do you have friends, Blue? And how? You ask me to tell truth. I have. What do I want? Understanding, exchange, victory, a game, hiding and discovery. You're a swift opponent, Blue. You play long odds. You run the table. If we're to be at war, we might as well entertain one another. Why else did you taunt me at the start? Yours, Brad. B.S. Cochineal. I get it now.
Atlantis sinks. Serves it right. Red hates the place. For one thing, there are so many Atlantises, always sinking in so many strands. An island of Greece, a mid-Atlantic continent, an advanced pre-Minoan civilization on Crete, a spaceship floating north of Egypt, on and on. Most strands lack Atlantis altogether. Know the place only though dreams and mad poets matter whispers. Because there are so many, Red cannot fix just one, or fail to. Sometimes it seems strands but Atlantises to thwart her. They conspire. History makes common cause with the enemy. 30, 40 times throughout her career, she has walked away from some sinking, burning island, thinking, at least that's over. 30, 40 times. The call has come. Go back. At the foot of the volcano, the dark-skinned Atlantes seek their ships. A mother carries her screaming son in one arm, clutches her daughter by the hand. Father follows. He bears their household gods. Tears streak the soot on his face. A priestess and a priest remain with their temple. They will be burned. They have lived their lives as sacrifices. To who again? Rad has lost track. She feels bad about that. They live their lives as sacrifices. Gods and children first. They feel the boats. As the earth shakes and the sky burns, even the bravest and most single-minded leave their work. Notes and sums and new engines remain behind. They take people and art. The math will burn. The engines melt. The arches fall to dust. This is not even one of the weirder Atlantises. No crystals here. No flying cars. No perfect governments. No psychic powers. Those last two things don't exist anyway. And yet, that man built a steam and pinwheel engine 6 centuries earlier than the mean. This woman, through reason and ecstatic meditation, discerned the usefulness of zero to her mathematics. This shepherd built freestanding arches into the walls of his house. Small touches, ideas so fundamental they seem useless. Nobody here knows their worth yet, but if they do not perish on this island, someone might realize their use a few centuries earlier and change everything. So Red tries to give them time. Her implants grow bright crimson to vent heat. They sear her flesh. She sweats buckets, growls, glowers. She pushes herself here. Island savings not on one woman job. So she works harder than one woman can. She rolls enormous boulders to break the coming lava flows. She plows new fake riverbeds with her hands. With the tools at her disposal, she breaks rocks and forms their pieces into other rocks elsewhere. The volcano quakes and splits. vomits rock into the air. A stone pine of soot sprouts from its peak. She sprints uphill, a streak of skin and light. The lava shimmers, bubbles, spits. Some lands near her. She steps aside. The ash-green sea reflects the royal black sky. The last cormorants flee. Darkness against dark. Red searches for a sign. She is missing something. She does not know what. She ponders skies and oceans for a while, wanders. While Red looks away, a good of lava splashes towards her face. She catches it in her palm without looking. Her skin, if it were the sort of skin the panicked villagers below wear around their meat, should char. It is not, does not. Too long watching, she turns back to the caldera, to the wailing lava. She stops. Black and gold vein the rising red. Some sun surfaces look like this. When she visits them on the shore leave. That's not what arrests her. The shifting colors from the words that last mere moments, in handwriting now familiar. As the lava flows, those words change. She reads. Her lips frame syllables one by one. She commits the words, the fire flames, to the old kind of memory. There are cameras in her eyes, which she does not use for this. A recording mechanism clamps around the strand of fiber in her skull, which might be mistaken for an optic nerve. She turns it off, which the agency does not think she can do. The lava overflows its lip. She had meant to break this high promontory on which she stands, to make a sort of spout, spilling molten rock down her predetermined channel. Rather, she stands and watches. Below, the village burns, without her capstone effort at the peak. Her dikes and redoubts work less well, but the mathematician still has time to grab her wax table tablets at least. The boats leave. They get far enough away to survive the earthquake wave as their homes tumble into the sea. Red has not quite failed. She shakes her head and walks away, hoping this is the last Atlantis they will send her back to save. She remembers. The volcano stilts. Winds part the clouds in time and leave the blue sky. The seeker scrambles up the slick and barren hill. Strands of thin, glistening volcanic glass cluster near the cooling lava. Another time and place they will be called Pele's hair. The seeker gathers them by hand like flowers, humming. My care for Cardinal. Let me tell you a secret. I loathe Atlantis. Every last single Atlantis across all strands. It's a putrid thread. Everything you've likely been taught about Garden and my shift should lead you to believe we treasure it as the bastion of good works, the original Platonic idea for how the civilization ought to be. How many bright-eyed adolescents have poured the fever of their souls into lives imagined there. Magic, infinite wisdom, unicorns, the gods themselves made flesh. The work we do to maintain these notions is more subtle than you might think, given the publishing peccadillos of dozen 20th centuries. What a robust priesthood Atlantis must have had to support so many earnest young things, pitching their past lives in its temples. But what a dreary place, stagnant, sick as a sucking wound. A successful experiment with disgusting results. The volcano was the best thing to ever happen to it. Now it's a legend, possibility, mystery, a far more generative engine than anything it developed over a few thousand years. That's what we treasure. That's us, always. The volcano and the wave. Thank you for your words on eating. After weeks of chips, biscuit, they were especially welcome. I should tell you, as Miss Leavitt would, that it's customary to send letters that can be opened without ruining the seal, but I appreciate your innovation more than I can say. What I can say, it was very cold out on the ice. Your letter warmed me. You talk of ideographic signatures, and operational security brought to mind some grooming work I did among a few strands worth of bees and Hendwick's botanists. While there it was my pleasure to observe correspondence between them and their lady. Just how layered and complex plain speech could be. How many secrets wrapped in the banner of sincerity, a word commonly invented in 16th centuries. Even that ideographic signature would easily be a lie, of course. Counterfeit stamps, sealed letters hidden under separate cover, the wrong color of wax or a silk flossing. How much glorious double talk took place while Mary, Queen of Scots, was under the roof. I assure you that cryptography pales in comparison. Imagine a cipher made up of interlocking moods, shifting in response to environmental stimuli. Also, standardized spelling wasn't yet a feature of English. Forging someone's handwriting was wasted effort if you didn't also learn their idiosyncratic orthography. Funnily enough, that would prove to be the undoing of latter century forgers. Chatterton, that marvelous boy, etc. We make so much of lettercraft literal, don't we? Whacked seals aside, letters as time traveling letters, hidden meanings. I wonder what you see me saying here. Absent from your mention of food so sweet, so savory, was any mention of hunger. You spoke of the lack of need. Yes, no lion in pursuit, no animalist procreative desperation. And these lead to enjoyment, certainly. But hunger is a many-splendored thing. It needn't be conceived only in limbic trams. In biology, hunger read, to see a hunger or to stroke it, to feel hunger as a furnace, to trace its edges like teeth. Is this a thing you singly know? Have you ever had a hunger that whetted itself on which you fed it, sharpened so keen and bright that it might split you open, break a new thing out? Sometimes I think that's what I have instead of friends. I hope it isn't too hard to read this. Best I could do on short notice. Hope it reaches you before the island breaks around you. Write to me in London next. Blue. London next. The same day, month, year, but one strand over, is the kind of London other London's dream. Sepia-tinted, skies strung with dirigibles. The viciousness of empire acknowledged only as a rosy backdrop, glow, redolent a spice and peddled sugar. Mannered as a novel, filthy only where a story requires it. All meat pies and monarchy. This is a place Blue loves, and hates herself for loving. She sits in a Mayfair tea-house, in a corner, back to the wall which with one eye on the door. Some spycraft rules transcend both time and space, and the other on a stylized map of the New World. She finds it slightly incongruous. The tea house favors a decidedly Orientalist aesthetic, but eclecticism is one of the many things Blue cherishes about the fibers of this particular strand. Her hair is now black and thick and long, deftly styled into a high chignon, gilded in braids, carefully twisted curls clustering at her nape, drawing attention to the length and slope of her neck. Her dress is modest and neat, not quite at the cutting edge of fashion. It's been a couple of years since the Princess line was new, but she suits it in charcoal grey. There is not here to play a role. She is here to be invisible. She has observed, with pleasure, the very fine china of which the establishment boasts. Mason's Ming dragon, sinuous as arteries, persimmon bright against gilt-edged bone white. She looks forward to her own pot, anticipates the dark, smoky, malty path her chosen tea will pick between the notes of Candace rose, delicate bergamot, champagne and muscat and violet. Her server arrives quietly, unobtrusively, laying out the Mason tiered cake tray, teapot, sugar bowl. As she settles the teacup on its saucer, however, Blue's hand snaps out to circle her retreating wrist. The server looks terrified. "This set," says Blue, adjusting, softening her eyes into kindness, her grip into a caress, "is mismatched." "I'm so sorry, miss," says the server, biting her lip. "I'd already made the pot, but the cup was cracked, and I thought you'd not want to wait longer for your tea. And all the other sets were spoken on account of it's a busy time of day. But if you're happy to wait, I could—" "No," she says, and her smile is like clouds parting. The withdrawal of her hand into her lap is an erasure. A thing the server imagined, surely. This woman is a perfect picture of a lady. It's very beautiful. Thank you. The server ducks her head and retreats back into the kitchen. Blue stares intently at the teacup, its saucer and spoon. Blue Italian, classical figures harvesting grain, carrying water forever beneath the rim. She pours her tea delicately without straining the leaves. She lifts her teaspoon to the light. Can see that it's coated with a down-thread substance. She thinks she recognizes, but sniffs to be sure. She wills herself not to look around, commands every atom of her body into stillness, forbids the need to leap into the kitchen and pursue and hunt and catch. Instead, she stirs the spoon, empty, into the tea, and watches as the leaves unclump, swirl, spindle into letters. Each rotation is slow, and she marks paragraph breaks with small sips. Every sip undoes the letters until she swirls them into meaning again. Briefly she wonders if the hardness of her throat is poison, her inability to swallow around it anaphylactic. This does not frighten her. She closes her eyes against the alternative, which does. When the tea and letter are finished, clumps again remain. She reads the dregs as a postscript.
Easy enough to do when the New World map matches it so precisely. Easy to read the discrepancy as direction. She dabs at her mouth, lips the teacup, places it upside down beneath the boot of her heel, and grinds it so hard and swift that its destruction makes no sound. After she's gone, the seeker, dressed as help, armed with dustpan and brush, collects the remnants, gathers them like rosebuds. When she is out of sight, she cuts the mix of clay and bone and leaf into 3 tidy lines, tightly rolls up a banknote, and inhales sharply enough to feel smoke behind her eyes. Dearest 000FF. Common cause on Atlantis. Who would have thought? I suppose on threads one thing. They train us full confident in that knowledge. Each has facets, hooks, barbs, useful in different ways depending on articulation. The novice believes a single change will make a thread thus or thus. An event, an invasion, or a spasm, or a sigh, is like a hammer, one side blunt and perfect for driving nails, the other clawed to pry them free. And like hammers, you store Atlantises out of sight when not in use. Stick 'em in a drawer somewhere safe till the next need comes round. I wonder, in that light, how much of your work has helped me? And the other way round, a question beyond my calculative capacity. I'd ask the Chaos Oracle, but I have enough trouble with the higher-ups at present. I had to stop fast after your last letter caught me napping. Commandant wanted explanation, as Commandant tends to. After the sinking island took so many treasures with it, a brief lapse in efficiency according to the agency's models, but when within tolerance considering my track record. But added to the inroads your sides made against our more exposed deep-covered teams. Well, I shouldn't talk shop. What a bore, your tea salon pals would say. I summarize. It's been too long since my last letter. Strand 233's Atlantis was not the most offensive of the brood, and I spent little enough time there. Joke as I might, I see the value. Humans need marks to strive for, but imperfect systems decay, so we build them ideals. Change agents climb up thread, find helpful strands, preserve what matters, and let what doesn't fall to dust. Mulch for the more perfect future's seed. Miss Leavitt suggests relying on metaphors one's correspondent, that's you, I think, will find meaningful. I confess I don't entirely know what's meaningful to you. I fall back on assumptions, seeds and grass growing things. It verges on stereotype, and when you write me, you write in furnace and in flame. You ask about hunger. You ask in particular about my hunger. The short answer, no. The longer answer, I don't think so. We say needs before they strike. In this body, an organ, a designed, implanted, rigorously tested organ, seated somewhere above my stomach, registers the moment my metabolism requires fuel and stops the lizard-brained old subsystems that would make me keen and irritable and blunt my thoughts. All those tricks damn evolution plays to make us hunters, killers, seekers, and finders and gorgers.
I can disable the organ when I must, but it's so much more stable to receive the status report when you feel weak. But the hunger you describe, that blade jutting from the skin, the weathering as of a hillside often struck by storm, the hollowness, it sounds beautiful and familiar. When I was a girl, I loved reading. An archaic pastime, I know. That index and download are faster, more efficient, offering superior retention and acquisition of knowledge. But I read antique volumes handed down and fresh replicated books. How strange to uncover things in sequence. And so I read a comic book once about Socrates. On the comic book, he was a soldier. He was that part's true, I asked him. And one night, as his fellows lay down to sleep, he started thinking. He stood immobile, lost in thought, until the dawn, at which instant he found the answer to his question. It all seemed very romantic to me at the time, so I felt my pod and wandered up thread, and far away, far from the chatter and the mutual observation, I found a hilltop on a small world, breathable but barren, and I stood there like Socrates in the comic book, lost in thought, weight on one foot. And I did not move. On sunset, the stars rose. They are a rose, right? Or something. Dante said that. I realized that as my ears grew used to the silence, I could hear the others. Our chatter swarmed the heavens. Our voices echoed from the stars. This was not how Socrates stood, or Li Bai, or Ku Yang either. My isolation, my experiment, had caused a small sensation among those who cared for me, and for whom I cared, and that sensation spread. Lenses and eyes turned upon me. I was, I think, 13. I received suggestions, philosophy textbook, meditation guides, offers of practice and alliance. They crowded round, whispers in my ears. Are you okay? Do you need help? You can talk to us. You always can. There were tears. Other organs bind the process too. Weeping, they keep our eyes clear and minds sharp. But chemistry is chemistry. Cortisol, cortisol. It feels harder to write than it should. It feels easier to write than it should as well. I'm contradicting myself. That geometers would be ashamed. I sent them away. Each being's entitled to her privacy, so I refused to let them see me. I was the only person on that tiny rock, and I made the world go dark. Wind blows, high places grow cold at night. Sharp rocks hurt my feet. For the first time in 13 years I was alone. Whatever I was, whatever I am, tumbled first up into the stars, then down to the broken land. I dug into the soil, night birds called, something like a wolf, but solitary and larger, with 6 legs and double-banked eyes, batted past. The tears dried, and I felt lonely. I missed those voices, I missed the minds behind them. I wanted to be seen. That need dug into the heart of me. It felt good. I'm not certain how to compare this to something you should know. But imagine a person melded to a thing. An artificial god the size of mountains, built for making war in the far corners of the cosmos. Imagine that great weight of metal all around her, pressing her down, giving her strength. Its hoses melting with her flesh, Imagine she shears the hoses off, steps out, frail, sapped, weak, free. I was light, hollowed, hungry. The sun rose. I found no revelation. I'm not Socrates. I know Socrates. I served with Socrates, and you, Senator. But I digress. But I walked on from that place to another, and from that to another in turn, until years later I came home. And when Commandant found me, slid inside me, said, "There's work for those like you." I wondered if all agents were like me. They weren't, I found that later. But we're all deviant in our different ways. Is that hunger? I don't know. No friends, though. Blue. That's not at all what I would have thought. I don't know. I suppose we see you all curling around campfires singing old struggle songs. Have you been lonely? I hope the tea is well. Good? Well, I'll look for you next in a more public forum. Yours, Fred. Postscriptum. I hesitate to write this, but I've noticed my letters run long. If you'd rather I grow more concise, I can. I don't want to presume. Postscriptum. Apologies for the impression of my salutation. I think salutation is what Mrs. Levitt calls that. I forgot what name the Strand 8C19 Londoners gave that shade of blue on imported porcelain. Would have used it if I remembered. Postscriptum. We're still going to win. As the prophet says, everybody's building them big ships and boats. The emperor reigns uphill, flanked by his mummified co-rulers, temples, each served by their own high priest. Stone steps and highways link peak and to peak along the ridge. Great cities grow and glow. Downslope spread the farms, and beneath those against the shoreline. Unprecedented as pomegranates in local logic. A seaport. Coastline trade occurs, of course, and boats ply the highland lakes. Quechua sailors and fishermen know the shapes of the wind, can sail through any storm, rate themselves equal to any wave. The western ocean's horizon has always seemed to wall to them. Beyond this rests the world's end, but a genius who has spent his life counting the path of stars and collecting bits of storm-cast wood and weed upon the beach has a theory that another land waits across the water. Another genius, a decade older than the first, has discovered a method of knotting reeds far stronger and more durable than any her mothers made. With it, a team under her direction could build a boat large enough to carry a village. "What good is the land across the water?" young man asked the first genius, "when we have no way to get there?" "As soon grasp for the moon." "What good for coastal fishing?" young man asked the second, "is a boat that can carry a village?" Fortunately, geniuses understand that young men are often fools. So they thought the wisest being they knew. Each separately climbed the many thousand steps to the mountain peak, and on audience day they knelt before the current emperor's great-grandfather, mummified upon his throne, gold and jewel bedecked, radiant with age and command, and offered their gifts to him. And the secret priests who wait behind the emperor's thrones are not young, nor are they all men, and they can frame
2 points into a line. So the great Grand Emperor's word goes out, and so a port is built, and sailors flock, beckoned by adventure. Adventure works in any strand. It calls to those who care more for living than for their lives. They will sail together to a new world. They will sail together to a land of monsters and miracles. Currents will bear their massive fish-tailed ships across, freighted with silver and tapestries, with knotwork and destiny. Red Knot reads with fingers calloused as wood. She was one of the second genius's earliest students. She nudged her seek the great Grand Emperor's aid and held her elbow as they climbed. She is no warrior here, no general. She is a woman taller than usual, who emerged from the woods one day naked and alone, and was sheltered. She nods and weaves well, because she has learned. When she has finished this ship, the production model, large enough to hold 2 villages at least, then it will sail, and she will sail with it, because someone needs to tan the knots if they break. She plays a tenuous game, the strand. As she nods and thinks to herself, she decides she would describe it using terms from Go. You place each stone expecting it may do many things. A strike is also a block, is also a different strike. A confession is also a dare, is also a compulsion. Will the people of Tawan Tinsu brave the ocean their murderers will one day call the Pacific, and finding the swift currents travel to the Philippines, or even farther, as others have traveled before? Will they, crossing waters so unfished that all a woman need to do to eat a dart, her hand beneath the waves, and pull the fish up, wriggling and silver, find new civilizations and make conquest our common cause? Will this alliance and trade stretched across the Pacific save Tawan Tisuyu when Pizarro's grotesque sails belly up from the Thals? Will, at the least, early contact with Eurasian plagues strengthen these people against them? Will the tradesmen make it so far as a China ruled by the Ming, soon to reel from an enormous currency crisis that will bring the empire to its knees? A currency crisis brought on by the shifting exchange rate between copper, cash, and silver, of which the people of Tawansuyu sport an ample supply. Stabilized, will the Ming duck the 4th century cycle of empires rise and fall and endure, growing, transforming, expanding, to keep pace with the West's slow enlightenment and its overweening industrial revolution? Perhaps. Small likelihood, but we must seize each chance. The agency is not happy. Other agents have been caught or killed, cleansed from the weave, or marooned in strands, of which it's better not to think. Not Red. Not yet. But she must work faster. Red's hands slip on the knot. She's not thinking of herself. She is explaining. And to whom is she explaining? Well, she looks out to the meeting of sky and sea, stands up, walks away. She feels observed. Might Commander be watching her? And if so, for what? She has been so careful.
She does not even think the sky's name often. An old man catches her pacing on the beach and offers cloth for the sails. Sample after sample. She flips through them. Too weak, too weak, too weak, too rough. And this one, what even is it? Bunched and uneven? More crochet than weaving. This one, she says. As the sun falls west, she perches on a rock and rolls the language of the knots between her oak-hard fingers. She feels each letter and word and wonders how long the sky and sea spent winding this cord. And who taught her the knot code in the first place? Whether the iris bit her lip in frustration as she worked through the difficult passage. When the sun set, she takes the unraveled thread, snips it into length, and throws each length into the receding tide. Stars shine, and the moon, a dark shape, slips along the bright waves and dives. One by one, the seeker gathers the strands and ties them about their wrist so tight her fingers pale and stiffen. She makes a fist, tenses, her skin splits beneath the cord and closes over it again. Red, who's waited motionless on the shore since sundown, sees something like a seal against the waves of light, and wonders.